Hey there, and greetings from New York City, the center of the worldwide coronavirus pandemic. So we hear a lot about the supposed liberal bias in media, but I think things are a lot more complicated than that. Most U.S. news sources do pursue a certain woke agenda around race, feminism, and LGBT rights that is traditionally seen as left-leaning. But these exact same news sources also spend a tremendous amount of time covering for Republicans. As one glaring example, I have yet to see a single article or broadcast pointing to the very basic fact that the United States is now going through its fourth major disaster in the past 20 years, and every single one of these crises has been the result of the failings of a Republican president. The first disaster came on September 11th, 2001, when the U.S. government failed to keep a bunch of mostly Saudi terrorists from murdering thousands of Americans. The Republican excuse for this extraordinary intelligence failure is a common one among politicians. They blame the other guys. And I guess it's plausible to claim that the Clinton administration does share some blame with Bush, who had only been in office for 8 months at the time. But there are some other aspects of 9/11 that make it a more obvious Republican failure for me. Al-Qaeda, the folks who pulled off the attack, were born out of a CIA-Saudi cesspool that was a direct result of Ronald Reagan's Afghanistan policy in the 1980s. And one of the worst things about 9/11 is the fact that we never went after the country responsible for the majority of the terrorist funding and ideology. There are many reasons for this, but one of the largest is the lucrative relationship that both the Republican Bush presidents had with the Saudi royal family. 9/11 was a very Republican disaster. Republican business interests were probably the main reason for the second disaster as well. In 2003, against the will of most of our allies, much of the U.S. public, and most of the world, George W. Bush took the United States to war in Iraq. The Middle East has never recovered, and it's arguable that U.S. politics has never recovered either. Knock-on effects from this disastrous and unnecessary war include 1 million dead in Iraq and Syria, the militarization of U.S. culture and political life, the rise of the Islamic State, and the extraordinary flow of refugees that may have killed the European Union. It also made all U.S. attempts to lead the world in human rights and freedom look like a sad joke. In some ways, all 450 videos on this channel document the results of this one extraordinary fuck-up. I was young and stupid in 2003, and I was a big Iraq War supporter. Now I make anti-intervention YouTube videos to try to make up for that. I learned my lesson. Not many others did. Nobody really disputes that this was a Republican-led disaster, so let's move on to the third one. I've been reading about 2008 a lot lately, and many write that it was the kind of economic crisis that only comes around once every 100 years. Well, now it seems like we get a 2008 or worse economic crisis once every Republican president. The 2008 financial crash was born out of the U.S. housing crisis, but it became an international tragedy. It didn't just break economies, it kind of broke economics. Even 12 years later, after the return of anemic economic growth, everything seems like it's still held together by spit and bubble gum. International banking, the Federal Reserve, the European Union, it all still sort of functions, but I'm not sure anybody really knows why. The 2008 financial crisis came after George W. Bush had been president for 7 years, so it's a lot harder for the Republicans to blame it on Clinton. They tried to do it anyway. There may actually be elements of truth to this, but when it comes to financial regulation, and most other things really, Bill Clinton was basically a Republican. If you find that hard to swallow, check out the Ronald Reagan versus the Joker video that I'll link at the end of this vid. Bush was the president, and he should have done more to stop the nightmare that was coming. But if we're honest, the tone of extreme irresponsibility set by the leadership of the Federal Reserve probably bears most of the responsibility. Alan Greenspan was very much a Republican, appointed by a Republican. 2008 was a Republican disaster too. Which brings us to the Trump virus. The disease may have started in China, but despite months of warning, its epicenter is now in the United States. China's numbers are probably fraudulently low, but in the US, we didn't even start testing in large numbers until the virus had been here for 2 months. Our official estimate could be 10 times too low. After failing to use any of the federal government's awesome powers to save us, Trump is now picking fights on Twitter with the governors who are trying to do the job. Trump is a parody and an acceleration. He seems to be trying to do all 3 of George W. Bush's greatest hits at once. Right now, we don't have a 9/11 going in 2 cities. We have a 9/11 going in every city, town, and village in the country. Of course, this comes with a financial disaster that makes 2008 look like a walk in the park. Oh, and it's been pushed out of the headlines, but right now, Trump and his idiot cronies are actively trying to start another war in Iraq. If the Republicans were trying to destroy the United States of America, they couldn't do much worse. So how did we get here? Why does media keep covering up for Republicans? Well, we supposedly have this diverse media sphere, but we really don't. I talked at the beginning of this video about performative wokeness. The owners of corporate media who tend to own other businesses love this sort of thing. Inclusion means bigger markets. Even Fox, which sometimes likes to pretend it's not, is very on board with wokeness. Fox personalities who dance too close to the line get suspended and fired all the time. I'm very cool with that. But the business people who love wokeness also love war because it makes money. And they really love tax cuts, which means they love the Republican Party. And that's why nobody will tell you, and that's why nobody in the mainstream media will tell you that Republicans are responsible for all 4 of the greatest disasters in the past 20 years. Is it really that surprising that a party dedicated to destroying government would be bad at governing? CNN, Fox News, and the New York Times will never give you an honest answer to that question. Which is why you have to come to people like me on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And if you want to keep me up here on YouTube, I'd be grateful if you checked out my crowdfunding thing on Patreon. What with the economic crisis, folks have understandably begun to drop off. So if you're in a position to help out, I'd be grateful. Thanks.